Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Valentino with Grand Futures Prevention Coalition, working to prevent substance use problems in youth, among youth and young adults in Northwest Colorado. We're jumping straight into our panel discussion now because we have a packed session. So our panel discussion on substance use disorder within the criminal justice system. We have 6 experts joining us today to share their unique perspectives on working to improve care and response in rural communities, from initial response to courtrooms, to sentencing, to treatment and recovery. Today, we welcome Emily Richardson, Manager of Co-Responder Services at Colorado's Office of Behavioral Health, Matt Carson, District Attorney for Colorado's 14th Judicial District covering Routt, Moffat, and Grand counties, Craig Thornhill, Licensed Addiction Counselor providing services within the Routt and Moffat County jails, Valerie Resendez, Diversion Program Manager for Colorado's Office of Behavioral Health, James Tiny McLaughlin, the Director of Community Paramedicine at Ute Pass Regional Health Services District, and John Trolley, a lived experience expert who is currently in recovery and currently incarcerated in Routt County Jail. Moderating our panel today is J.K. Costello, Senior Consultant with the Stedman Group. And thank you all for joining us. And J.K., I will let you take it away now.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. As Sarah said, my name is J.K. Costello. I'm a physician and consultant with the Stedman Group. We work on population health for substance use. And I'm really excited here today. One of the things that we work more than anything, and probably the best thing that we get to work on, is substance use in criminal justice settings. And today we're going to talk about diversion, we're going to talk about co-responders, prevention, treatment in jails, and recovery. So there's a lot to go over today, and I'm really thankful for all 6 of our experts that were able to make it today. And we have one person with some time constraints, so I am going to fast forward real quick to him, John Trolley. And John, it says Tim Hall, but we actually have John Trolley. John, we're really appreciative that you can make it. Could you give us a little bit of introduction to yourself?
Yeah, my name's John. I'm currently incarcerated at Routt County. I was arrested back in January. I'm currently I'm 9 months clean. It definitely was a blessing in disguise the way everything happened. I probably wouldn't be alive right now if it didn't go down the way that it did. But I've definitely had some struggles moving forward, but, thank for the Steamboat community, I was able to get in with actually the Front Range Clinic, who you guys were just speaking with, and they directed me and got me moving in my recovery. My recovery started out with them. I was doing an IOP, and then I went into a 30-day inpatient clinic, which then after graduating through that, I jumped right back into their IOP program and continued that. And then I also got associated with down in Denver, which the Front Range Clinic as well also works down there. And I got in with the Michael Hornbuckle Foundation, which got me into a sober living. And from that point, I became the house manager of that sober living, and going through all that, I've been dealing with the whole court aspect of it all as well, the stresses of all that. And it's the Front Range Clinic has been a huge help to me throughout that. And throughout the whole time, I've been doing a medically assisted treatment as well. I take Suboxone. And now I'm doing 90 days. And basically, and I'm still able to have my Suboxone while I'm in here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. So backing up a little bit, before you were incarcerated, what are some of the things that you think could have helped in the community, both from the criminal justice side and from the community side, that could have helped you reduce substance use and keep you out of jail?
It was definitely the whole fear aspect of coming forward that I had a problem. That made it really hard being in a small town. And then the fact of, just how I did get in trouble, the social media, the newspaper and everything blew everything up, basically, to the point of the shame that of dealing with the fact that I have a drug problem. They definitely blew it way out of proportion, more than they blew it out of proportion more than what actually was going on. Like I just really, when it comes down to it, myself and my girlfriend had a terrible drug problem, and you know, and I had to basically do from when I got arrested, I had to do all the work to get to where I was at right now, you know, so that was a big difference. Um, and I was able to do all that with scholarships, grants, you know, and all the help of all the people that I've just mentioned earlier helped me get to that point. But definitely, like, the big part of coming forward is just being in the small town and just having the fear of coming forward that you have a drug problem. I mean, it's just something that in these small ski communities, especially, they don't, you know, it's just something that it's not talked about. And it's just, and I mean, these ski towns are where the substance abuse problems are becoming more and more. It's, you know, when you think of a ski town, you think of a party town, and that's, you know, that's what I was brought up doing. I was brought up a competitive skier, and you know, and I definitely, you know, that's where it started. And then injuries, stuff like that from, you know, living in this ski town led me into my addictions and led me into my pain pill addictions. And then my pain pill addiction moved into heroin. And you know, and it's just, and you know, having that type of addiction isn't something you go around and you know, you're super, you know, that's something you don't want people to know about. But you know, when I got arrested, it was a huge surprise to everybody in town. Nobody knew that had a heroin problem, you know, and it's just, and that was, you know, it was embarrassing. So it was really hard for me, you know, myself, my girlfriend, and then obviously once the cat was out of the bag, that moving forward, I got the help that I needed.
Yeah. And thanks. It sounds like you've been able to maintain some of that help in jail, which is awesome. Like MAT, buprenorphine.
Yeah.
And understanding, like, I know were some really good programs in the jail that have been on hold due to COVID. What other things have you benefited from while you're in jail? Or if you feel like the medications are the primary thing, what else could help you while you're in jail?
Basically the literature. I mean, definitely a huge support of NA. Doing their step work. I'm not doing any of my step work at the time just due to reaching out to my sponsor. That's something that's holding me back from doing that. But having that literature, and basically just being able to just do a lot of reading, I guess, would be the point. But I mean, what they do have in place, um, one thing that I could just recommend is the way that NA, I mean, like, they don't meet in person anymore. Everything's done on Zoom, like this meeting is right now. And I know that Routt County, Grand County, and Moffat County all work pretty closely in the, you know, in the judicial system. And I could, you know, that would be a recommendation, is doing Zoom meetings via the people that are incarcerated. But I mean, I don't know. That's, you know, that's not for me to say. But as of right now, all of the meetings and everything like that, due to COVID, the pandemic, has been halted for right now. But I know that Lieutenant Boyle, that is something that he's been working towards really hard. And I got to speak with him for a while yesterday about it.
Okay, so more in-person services, and we will hear from judicial in just a little while from District Attorney Carson. So last question I have for you is, you know, when you leave jail, you said you've got another 2 months or so, I think.
Yes.
What kind of things are you going to do to stay in recovery? And along with that, like, what could the justice system or the community have in place to help people who are leaving incarceration?
Lieutenant Boyle and I believe the health partnership is trying to roll out a program that will help out getting me back on my feet. I have, you know, made, you know, my plan actually is I'm going to be working towards getting certification so I can actually work in recovery. It's something that the mountain towns, I think, really lack, is having support and people people can turn to for recovery. So my plan is I'm going back down to Denver and I'm going to get back into a sober living for a period of time and just get some certifications, stuff like that. And just try to keep moving forward. I mean, like I said, I've been clean. I just celebrated 9 months 2 days ago. And, I'd say it probably took me about 8 months to really get to where I was working again. Right before I came in here, I was finally basically almost set up for success. And, as far as holding a job, making money again, holding down my house and stuff like that. And so, I mean, I'm hoping once I get out of here, I can just walk right back into that and continue my recovery. Like I still continue, I meet with Front Range Clinic once a week. Obviously in here, that's not the case. I'm meeting with them once a month while I'm in here. And so just to continue doing that, I'm going to continue to work with the Michael Hornbuckle Foundation, which is out of Denver, and the Peer Coaching Academy is where I'm going to be getting my certifications moving forward to just keep doing that. So that's my game plan, and I'm thinking everything's going to work out in that manner.
Awesome. That's a pretty good game plan. I know some of those organizations like Peer Coaching Academy and obviously Front Range and Hornbuckle Foundation's a new one for me. So we got a couple minutes left on your part, and looks like no questions, but people say thank you so much for the work you're doing, and thank you for being honest and sharing your story. I'm a longtime local, and your story can help others. And personally, I appreciate your willingness to be here. I know there's a lot of shame involved, but it's really important that people hear from those who are most affected by substance use disorder. Is there anything else you wanted to say? And feel free to stay around until you have to get off the machine.
Yeah. No, I'd love to listen to what's going on. I've enjoyed everything so far. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So with that, we'll move on with the rest of our panel. Thanks again, John, for being here. So first, I'm going to have the 5 remaining panelists, Craig, James, Emily, Valerie, and Matt, introduce themselves briefly. So if you could take about a minute to tell us about your position, I would appreciate that. And I'll go in alphabetical order by first name. So Craig first.
All right. First, thank you very much for having me. And I wanted to say I appreciate John's story too. Appreciate him being able to log on to this. My name's Craig Thornhill. I'm a licensed professional counselor, licensed addiction counselor. I've been in the field since about 2004. Been up here for about 14 years. More specifically, was involved with, in the last year, direct jail-based behavioral services clinically in Routt County. Prior to that, for several years, supervising some clinical programming in the Moffat County detention system, and then also doing some direct jail-based behavioral services, particularly after 2019 when grant funding in 2018 changed. Currently, I'm in private practice. I was providing weekly male and female substance-specific groups in the Routt County Jail this last year since about May of 2019, but March 9th was probably the last group I ran because of COVID. Literally working as we speak, probably to go live again in November to be able to deliver those groups via their Polycom web system. So very much looking forward to that. So thank you.
Thanks. And actually, Craig, before we move on, I'm going to add on something I was going to have people answer anyway. If you could add to your intro a story about how you've seen alternatives to incarceration or jail-based programs help somebody stay on the path to recovery, I would appreciate that. Yeah,
I'll give you 2 examples. One we spoke briefly about. I'll give you one from both counties. I had a person I was working with in Moffat detention who was there for opiate-related charges, and I remember seeing them detox. This was a few years ago, laying on the cold floor, going through detox. We were able to engage her in some treatment. Long story short, we were able to transition that person very quickly into outpatient services, psychiatric medicine, et cetera. Last check, she was 2 years clean, having gone through all of that, holding a job, et cetera, and doing very well and staying in her recovery process. So that's one example of catching somebody right where they're at and moving very quickly to treatment in the detention facility back into community. Another one that was more interesting to me, and a sign, I think, of things we need to keep doing. In the time I was running groups over here, I did have an individual who was there for some primarily opiate-related offenses, was engaging in group, did very well. Long story short, he did a corrections stint, and then I got a random message from his mother about how he wanted to continue on his recovery process and was so impacted by being in jail and having somebody go into the jail to deliver those types of services, that he wanted to continue on after his, I think, about a year long or 8 months. I forget exactly what he did in DOC. And so it was a really nice motivation that had a huge impact. And then we hit this wall of sober living, particularly for males. And so, but the success part was it had enough impact that he wanted to continue. And this was a person who had really struggled with opiates for 10 years, I think. So I think it could be pretty profound, particularly in the detention facility.
Thanks, Craig. And next, Emily Richardson.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Emily Richardson. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I work for the Office of Behavioral Health. I'm the manager of co-responder services, and I've been with OBH for a little over 2.5 years now. Prior to coming to OBH, I worked in community mental health for 11 years, working with individuals who had mental health and/or substance use issues who were involved in the criminal justice system. And for about the last third of that, I worked with regional law enforcement, helping put on crisis intervention team trainings in the county, as well as helping to develop, implement, and supervise co-responder programs in 3 different police departments. And as far as a story or an example of how co-responder has helped individuals in the community, one that I have not had direct contact with, but this is a story that a program had shared. They had an individual who had a long history of mental health issues as well as substance use issues, a lot of contacts with the police, was homeless at the time. They had a history. They had gone back and looked into the police records and had like over 80 calls for service for this individual, and that's not counting almost daily complaints from businesses for kind of nuisance things. I don't have the details of the complaints from businesses, but a lot of contact with law enforcement. The co-responder program was able to make contact with him and build rapport with this individual, and he was willing to try to get services. So they helped figure out a long-term residential treatment program to get into, helped him get the application, really went hands-on as far as helping this person get into services, and even helped him get to the treatment facility, and then kept in contact. And I'm not exactly sure the status of this person right this minute, but last time they mentioned this person, they had gained weight back, they were looking really good. There's, of course, some times where they wanted to leave the facility, but decided to stay and seemed to be really engaged in the treatment and recovery process.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily. Next, James.
Hi, I'm James McLaughlin. My nickname's Tiny, and I'm the Director of Community Paramedicine with UPass Regional Health Service District. And I run a program that focuses on mental health assessment and response to behavioral and substance use disorder crisis. We are the mobile crisis provider for our portion of Teller County, as well as portions of Park, Douglas, and El Paso. It's fairly rural. We work with a multitude of small law enforcement agencies. And my story, I'd like to give, if I may, 2 brief stories. The first one is kind of a tragic outcome and an example of how we used to do business in our communities. And we had a young man who was caught at school with a small amount of narcotics. And instead of offering him services and working with him and trying to, to understand what it was that was driving the desire for the substance use, this young man was charged with possession and brought through the traditional criminal justice system. And in the middle of that process, before it had an opportunity to be completely adjudicated, he was at home. He was still using recreational drugs on a fairly regular basis. And one night he completed suicide. And like when you throw a pebble into a pond, that caused a ripple effect in our community that was profoundly devastating for many years to come. It was a very tragic situation. And what I've seen since the conversation has changed, both in our community and across the state and across the country, what I've seen with our local law enforcement agencies is a real desire to take an entirely different approach. And that's where the partnership between our agency and all the local law enforcement agencies has really come into play. And that is now when law enforcement identifies an opportunity to involve our team, either with behavioral health crisis or substance use disorder crisis, they reach out to us early. And then they allow us to come in and come alongside the client, work to de-escalate the crisis, utilizing motivational interviewing and some tools like that. Understand, exactly what's going on with the client, and then providing the client with the resources to empower themselves to get the additional support that they need. Whether that be, going to a detox facility or getting them set up with Front Range Clinic, which is an amazing program, and getting them into medication-assisted treatment, or teaming up with Viewpoint Psychotherapy, which is another group that we work with to get them under a program to get medication management. All of these tools, they're great, but if you don't have buy-in from the local law enforcement agencies and your local community partners, it's really hard for them to even gain traction in the first place. So I think that's probably for our program the biggest contributing factor to the success that we've had in our community is the fact that our local law enforcement agencies genuinely have a heart of service, and they want to see people have every opportunity to be successful. And seeing that paradigm switch has really changed outcomes in our community. So, so my second example plays into that, and that is we had a person who was homeless, and it's hard to be homeless anywhere. It's extremely difficult to be homeless in a rural mountain community with very limited resources, and was struggling with substance use disorder, and really struggled with social norms. And one day, this client was sleeping in one of the drainage canals in our community, and the snow melted and all of his stuff was washed away, and he had absolutely nothing. He was drenched, wet with cold snow runoff. And we were sitting in front of our office, and he walked by, and you could just tell looking at him that he was distraught and he was in despair. And we tried to offer him support at that time. He walked past us, wouldn't have anything to do with us. And a short time later, he had contact with law enforcement. And instead of seeing this as an opportunity to, to harass, quote unquote, a homeless person that, let's be honest, we've all seen in the past. What this law enforcement officer did is saw an opportunity to provide value to this person, and to provide service to this person, and reached out to us, and we were able to make contact with them, and really over the next few hours come alongside that person, understand what their challenges were, and understand what resources would best fit their needs. And we were able to get them steered towards those services, get them into a behavioral health facility to address both the substance use disorder and the behavioral issues. And then after they were released, we followed up with that client to get them set up with a local housing unit that was that they were able to have a safe place to stay, and continue to work their program and continue to do the things they needed to do to have overall success. And what's great about that story is we still get to see that young man, several times a month, and he's doing such a great job, and he's working so hard. And to even have a small, all the success is his. He's done all the hard work, but to have a small part to play in that has really made a difference. And my final point that I'd like to just say real quick is,
hey James, we're gonna have to, there will be time for more.
Sorry.
So I'm gonna stop you at the end of the story. It's a fantastic story to get to see somebody after you've helped them and they're on the road to recovery. But next, I'm gonna move on to Matt Carson, the DA.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Carson. Thank you very much for having me here. Just by way of introduction, I've been the district attorney here in the 14th Judicial District since 2019. I've been in the criminal justice system as an attorney for about 25 years. 17, if my math is right, 17 of those as a prosecutor, and in 8 years as a criminal defense attorney and a plaintiff civil rights lawyer. I first started, I went to high school here in the district and came back after law school to work in Grand County, and then realized that I would get some really valuable experience working in a bigger jurisdiction, and moved down to the Denver metro area and spent a good chunk of time down there working in a DA's office, and then in the AG's office, Ken Salazar, and then moved to Athens, Georgia, which is a great college town. Had a lot of great experiences there as an attorney, both as a prosecutor and then in private practice, and came back here to the 14th in 2014.
Excellent. Any stories about how maybe in a previous posting you saw a diversion or a co-responder help somebody?
Sure. A couple of examples. One, here and in the modern diversion model, I think, is different than it used to be. So, in all honesty, I haven't seen a lot of programs in my past postings or other jurisdictions that I would say would represent a modern gold standard. I think that the new way forward has really just started to get traction in recent years. But having said that, I have, not enough, but a good number of positive outcome stories when the criminal justice system reacted with something other than vengeance and prison. One was here in Routt County in 2015. The guy was in his late 20s, single, living, pretty fast, good kid, making some kind of rough choices. He got himself jammed up on some weapons charges, firearms charges, and drug charges. Came in without a lawyer. I was assigned to his case at the time. He was very stubborn. He didn't want to deal with a lawyer. I dealt with him honestly and without judgment. It's because it's the only way really for this job to function. We were able to convince him to consult with an attorney, and then we got him into a deferred judgment program. We didn't have adult diversion at that time. And he came out 100% successful. He had no felony conviction, no real conviction of any kind, no incarceration. I have seen him around town on many, many occasions in the past 5 years since all that played out. And he consistently tells me that that reaction that the criminal justice system had not only saved his life effectively, he's married, he's a very skilled worker, he's a father, but he was very appreciative because he didn't expect the system to react that way. And my takeaway from that is, it's not just what we do, it's how we do it. We need to make those meaningful connections. And then I'll say that another positive outcome, and it's in progress, and I'm very pleased to hear from him, is Mr. Trolley. I handled that case. I am well familiar with it. He got a chance from our district court judge that not a lot of judges would give under the circumstances. He was looking at prison time and has been given a chance, and he obviously, not just since his sentencing, but prior to that, has been making the most of it. And that's really great to see, because he was right on the edge. Even in a system that acts with more compassion than it has in the past, he was on the edge, and to see him making the progress he's making now is an absolute success.
Thanks, Matt. And finally, thanks for your patience, Valerie. I'm going to ask Valerie Resendez to introduce yourself.
Hello, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here. My name is Valerie Resendez, and I am the Diversion Program Manager with the Office of Behavioral Health. I have been with OBH a little over a year now, overseeing the 4 lead programs across the state. Prior to OBH, I worked with adults who had severe and persistent mental illness, as well as some involvement in the criminal justice system in a mental health center. But I have been doing work with forensic populations since 2006. That's kind of my specialty and the population that I really love working with. And I have a wonderful story that I was sent on Friday by the program manager in the San Luis Valley. Terry Deacon is with the Center for Restorative Programs, and so I'm a little nervous. And she let me know that a lead participant had emailed the DA's office and the diversion coordinator, and this is what they said. Good afternoon. I was referred to you by Audra. I am contacting you as a lead program participant to give you my sincere thanks. Words cannot describe how grateful I am for this program. I had a $300 a day addiction to heroin. I have been clean since December 20th, 2018. That's 477 days clean. I had quit 9 other times cold turkey to no avail, but my 10th time, this last time, December 20th, 2018, was pure misery. I spent 10 days in jail withdrawing. I went from 170 pounds to 145 in 10 days. I also didn't sleep the entire time I was incarcerated. When I was released, I contracted walking pneumonia. The first 30 days were hell. The intervention, compassion, and assistance provided by the LEAD program saved my life. There is no doubt in my mind that I would either be in prison or 6 feet deep if it wasn't for the LEAD program. As a San Luis Valley native, I have been to 36 funerals over the past 14 years due to opiates. I know in my heart of hearts that many of them might still be alive today if they could have been offered the assistance and the care the LEAD program provides. So to say that I am lucky and thankful is an understatement. The LEAD program helped me in my recovery and showed me that my identity is not a drug addict, the perceived scum of society. They showed me that I can be, and I am, a recovering drug addict, and that my life has value. That is who I am today. I can't tell you how tremendous it is not to be in an opiate-induced stupor anymore. This, along with the fact that I know I have people at my corner, provides me with an enormous sense of well-being, and that I am safe in the knowledge knowing that the LEAD program and myself is completely devoted to my sobriety.
That's powerful. Thanks, Valerie. So my first question is for you, Valerie and Emily. I know, there's a lot of emphasis on, we should legalize drugs, and Portugal's done so well. I also know, as with the most recent letter, that a lot of people, their involvement in the criminal justice system has been the impetus to turn their lives around. And you both work with a couple of programs that do that. So could you tell us a little bit about what your programs are and differentiate them, the diversion and the co-responder programs, please?
Sure. I'll go first, I guess. LEAD is law enforcement assisted diversion. And what it is trying to take those low-level offenders who are being charged with drugs, possession, prostitution, theft, trespassing, all of those low-level crimes, and on the front end, allow them an opportunity to do something different. And if they voluntarily accept to go into the LEAD program, those charges are then not filed. So they are, referred to the LEAD programs in the 4 areas. And that's when they get guerrilla case management to really help them address their unmet behavioral health needs that are causing the impetus to create or to engage in crime. And LEAD recently, the flagship program in Seattle, recently also announced a 3rd pathway that the Colorado programs are able to take, called Let Everyone Advance with Dignity, which means that law enforcement is still involved, but we are adding an extra way for the community to get involved with referrals. So folks don't necessarily have to even begin that process down the road of criminal involvement.
And co-responder is pairing law enforcement with behavioral health clinicians to respond in the community to either crises that are happening that law enforcement are getting called out to, or other behavioral health related calls for service. The calls that they're going out to may or may not have chargeable offenses happening. So that's one kind of difference between LEAD and co-responder. And co-responder as a diversion program is not only looking at diverting somebody, hopefully from the criminal justice system, but also from unnecessary hospitalizations or mental health holds or other things that are going to have some possible consequences, collateral consequences in their life, and really looking at trying to help get the individual services that they need so that they're not coming into so much contact with law enforcement. And there's kind of 2 different models that are generally used. So either what I call a primary response, which is where you have a dedicated team. So you have a dedicated officer and a dedicated clinician who respond out, and generally they're responding, the officer is not doing normal patrol duties as well. They're only responding to the behavioral health calls. And then the other option, which I think tends to work better in rural communities, is kind of secondary response, where law enforcement can call the clinician out to scene, and or if they've dealt with a situation, they can refer them for some follow-up to try to get that person connected. They do generally do follow-up and case management, not nearly as, it's not as guerrilla and not as not as in-depth as the LEAD program is.
Got it. So it sounds like the differences are length and intensity follow-up, whether there's a definite chargeable offense or not, and that the co-responder is happening right away. There's somebody riding along with them often to render assistance.
Yeah.
The diversion happens in ways other than LEAD, and I understand that there are not any diversion programs in Northwest Colorado, but there might be one soon. So Matt, would you tell us about that?
Certainly, thanks. So we are up and running now. We were able to secure a small grant. We were targeting, 80% more than we got, but the state budget tested positive for COVID, so it was pretty limited funding. But we do have a program up and running. We've got to be very focused with how we're using the limited funds so they have the greatest impact. And basically, what we're doing is targeting participants whose sort of primary basis for what I think of as intersecting the criminal justice system is mental health or substance abuse disorder. We're targeting participants. We're trying to prioritize people with needs that we can effectively address with the resources we have. And that's importantly, and my real focus of it, if we can make it the focus, is not just getting them, direct contact with the treatment provider, but trying to identify and help them mitigate against other risk factors that sort of get them into that place where the mental health is really impacting them in a bad way, or the addiction is just spiraling. Things like employment, housing, transportation. We want to, if we can, really devote these dollars to people who fit that criteria that we think we can help, and who don't have the independent means to access the things they need themselves. Our model is we have a case manager. It's a contract employee, which is going to be our primary challenge. There's only so much one individual can do. But between that individual who's quite committed and myself, I think we're going to be effective. And then our other challenge up here, as many of you know, I think is our geography. Getting people connected, physically connected with, or through telehealth, but getting people connected with the services they need can be quite a challenge. As I said, I'm really hoping that we can focus on not just the traditional treatment side of this, but on addressing some of those underlying roots, those causes. One thing I would ask, if any of you have friends, colleagues, peers that are in the local defense bar up here in the 14th Judicial District, is to remind them this program is up and running. One of the challenges I've found just in the past couple of months is it's hard for us to identify good candidates because we have such limited information on the prosecution side. These individuals are not our clients. They're not sharing with us the way, and nor should they. They should be sharing with their own attorneys. But I want to encourage the defense bar to bring us people, their clients, that they think would be good candidates for this program. I'm really excited about it. One of our deputy DAs, I think, is participating today, he's watching. Him and I had a conversation this morning. We think we've identified a good candidate. So hopefully we'll have some real world experience. If there's a silver lining to the limited budget, it's that we get to get this figured out on a small scale, and hopefully we'll make good use of that learning curve. And then when more funding becomes available, we'll be able to tweak it in ways that make it even more effective.
Thanks, Matt. So we heard a little bit about law enforcement response and co-responder. So other places, and actually this was a tragic moment in Philadelphia, I think last week, most people have heard about our response that probably could have been handled better by a mental health clinician or ambulance, was responded to by police, and it ended fatally for the gentleman in question. So James, you have a different way of responding to these crises. So will you tell us a bit about how you respond to mental health and substance use crises?
Absolutely. So I think John hit on one of the major contributing factors to people not getting help when they're in substance use disorder and behavioral health crisis, and that is stigma. That fear of everyone finding out, that fear of having your darkest secrets become public, and your skeletons ripped out of the closet against your will. And that is one of the most destructive aspects of substance use disorder and behavioral crisis. And it's one of the reasons that people don't get help. So what I love about our approach and our model, and I think it takes a variety of different approaches to be successful in a community. But what I love about our approach is that you wouldn't be ashamed of going getting help for cancer. You wouldn't be ashamed of going and getting help for heart disease. But as a society, we kind of have this stigma around behavioral health. And when we bring it into the realm of healthcare, when it's a paramedic responding and coming in and saying, you know what you have is a medical emergency, like any other medical emergency. And we're here to treat your medical problem and to provide you with the resources you need for that medical issue. It changes the paradigm of the conversation. And so that's what I love, and that's what I'm passionate about with our program. And it makes a huge difference for the clients because they start to understand, we're not here to judge you. We're not here to say that you've done something wrong. because you haven't, no more than anybody else that had a medical issue, right? I'm going to actively listen to what you're going through, and we're going to figure this out together. I'm not the expert in you. We're a team doing this together. And the interesting thing about that is that I spent the first 20 years of my career beating my head against a wall because we would go and respond on these people in need. And, you know, we would show up a bunch of police officers, a bunch of paramedics, a bunch of firefighters, and we'd all pile around this person in a small room and stand over them and breathe down their neck, and then, you know, rip them out of the house against their will and drag them off to, you know, the most expensive form of transport, an ambulance, to the most expensive destination, an emergency room. And then they'd sit there for 2 or 3 or 4 days sometimes in an inherently unstable environment before they maybe got the help that they need. Or they said, hey, look, you know, you're all better now. Good luck. Hope things work out okay for you. And then we wonder why the healthcare system is so expensive and why the results are so poor. And so this model is so much different because we're allowing the client to drive the process. We're coming alongside them. We're actively listening to them. We're trying to find those intrinsic motivators that are going to let them drive the process, because when they do that, they're inherently going to be more successful. And then we're trying to use local resources, because when you embed that person with resources in their local community, they tend to A, access them more easily, and B, tend to be more successful. So you know, when I look at the previous model and I go, you know, I was so frustrated. My career, I would not be in this field if we were still going that way. And I think that's another positive that comes from this. When you talk to law enforcement agencies and you talk to law enforcement officers and you talk to paramedics, this extends our career, because for the first time, we're actually feeling, we all got in this business to help people. And for the first time, we're actually feeling like we are accomplishing that mission. We are working with these clients, and the outcomes are positive, honestly, for the first time in our careers. And that is so amazing for us. And it's good for the community.
Thanks, James. So thanks everybody for all, you know, keeping people out of jail is obviously the best thing, but there will always be some people who end up in jail, end up in prison, and still need help when they're incarcerated. So Craig, could you tell us a little bit about some of the programs that you've helped to build in Routt County Jail? I know some of them have been on pause for COVID, but what are you doing to help people when they're incarcerated?
It's been a growth in both counties over the last, let's say, 2-3 years, honestly, to what started as probably a clinician going in a couple hours to just building more and more robust kinds of things. And in Routt specifically, from May of 19 until COVID hit, I was going in once a week, about half a day. The specific goal was to run early recovery skills as part of the matrix model, possibly relapse prevention groups, both male specific and female specific, and get those weekly kind of going, as well as coordinating with psychiatry from Mind Springs that was coming in, medical from the medical staff, possible MAT resources. And one of the coolest things about Routt that I just found neat, there was a fathers group coming in there. There was NA. There was a religious night where you could do group. There was meditation group on Sundays. Literally 7 days a week for a while, there was programming, something to look forward to that all fed itself and connected. And so literally COVID shut down a lot of that. But we're revamping and trying to rebuild, and how do we use telehealth to do groups? So all that is coming back online. And over in Moffett, they have an even more robust system they're trying to build, multiple days, mind over mood group, matrix relapse prevention groups. So really bringing it into the detention. It used to really upset me that folks would be sitting there or things would get continued for this, that, or the other, and 2 months would go by. no treatment for any substance use disorder. And so it's been pretty profound. And so I'm very excited to get back in and get those groups going again.
Excellent. And a brief follow-up to that. You mentioned to me that you feel like you've figured out the predictor of whether people are going to succeed when they're released. So talk a little bit about that. What are the things?
Yeah,
like
at least some of the variables, and I'll try to speak quickly because I know there's some other things we maybe need to get to, but a lot of things that people are already putting out: housing, transportation, particularly in a resort town when people tend to work 3 jobs. How about having multiple felonies for possession or various things on your resume trying to go back into the workforce? I found when I was the program director in Moffett for MindSprings and tracking data for a couple of years on this, the ones that we connected who would be released within 48 hours right into treatment, we would have the appointment already scheduled within 1 to 2 days. And sometimes they literally came from the detention right to the appointment, whether it was psychiatry, case management, or right into group. That little piece of data right there, catching them within 24 to 48 hours and really laying some groundwork, I found to be one of the hugest predictors of them staying in recovery. If I caught them a week later, I couldn't kind of keep them going in some of the other things. And I think the other major variable, sober living and housing, and in a resort town, I don't need to speak anymore about the devastating effects of what it's like to try to maintain that for some folks struggling with mental health and SUD concerns.
And I will toot our own horn a little bit. We have a grant through Memorial Regional Health called RCorp Implementation. And the 3 things I would say we're probably spending the most money and time on is housing, transportation. We have a really cool pilot I'm talking to Alpine Taxi about, and then workplaces that are friendly to people in recovery and people who've been convicted of crime. So doing everything we can to address that. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I have one question aimed at Matt and Valerie and Emily. How can diversion and co-responder programs increase equity in the criminal justice system?
So, I think it's something that programs have to make a concerted effort to do. I think it's something that that folks just need to keep it top of mind and work towards. But I think it can, if you take some of the factors that create an equity out of the equation, I don't know. I'm sorry. I just lost my train of thought. I think it's a tricky thing in general, and I think it's something that everybody needs to keep at top of mind. Having individuals who aren't normally at top of mind to provide services to, if we can reach out to them specifically, it just opens so many doors, as everybody has mentioned. That's all I've got. I want somebody else to take it.
I may have a thought on this. I think, co-responder programs, that's something that's a relatively new idea to me. Honestly, just in the past year, I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a huge part of what I'll characterize as the only humane way forward. It is the only way to do things. And I think adult diversion is similar. And the way in which I think they bring equity to a community is that I think any community it holds more justice, it holds more humanity when public health issues are addressed like public health issues, not like criminal justice issues, not like matters to be enforced and contained and put away where nobody can see them. And I think both with the co-responder program, as I understand it, I am no expert, and then with adult diversion, again, in the modern era, I think those are 2 outstanding ways to ensure that we're dealing with our public health crises and problems in a functional, sustainable, and humane way. And to me, that brings equity.
I have a piece I can add to that on the equity, and it tacks on to what James was saying, if I could just jump in real quick. Having done 12 years of 24-hour crisis services, assessing people, watching them sit there for 3 days to never get a bed, you take a person out of the ED for 3 days, you save thousands. You develop peer support programming and diversionary for mental health psychiatric placement, you save millions. You take the burnout from law enforcement, first responders, EMT, and mental health clinicians at 4 a.m. assessing people with feeling like they have nowhere to go with them, and frequent needers, not frequent flyers. You also save a workforce, and how much equity is in that. And just trying to tack on to what James was saying there, but there's mountains of equity and co-response, the right expertise, walking alongside the client, and all those areas. Had to put my 2 cents in.
Sure. Thanks, Craig. Valerie?
For me, I think it's a little easier to conceptualize because LEAD is kind of based on undoing racial disparity, and we focus on trying to help the most vulnerable folks that need it. And so, you know, the idea of giving people positive unconditional regard, which is, you know, not a new thing. Carl Rogers knew about this 100 years ago. And by, you know, taking away the idea that this is moral feelings or whatever, and just really thinking about how can we treat everyone with the dignity and respect that they deserve and that we would like, I think really helps to inform programs and quality of care and gets you results.
Thanks, Valerie. All right, I have one more question for each of our panelists. Really quick one. So if you had $1 million to do something in the field of mental health substance use response, what would it be? 20 seconds or less. We'll go in alphabetical order again. Craig.
I wish I had 18 minutes. Coordination continuum of care, as far upstream programming as we can get, more adult diversion, more sober living, more peer support, certified peer supports, more addiction specialists, more police internal first responder peer support programming, that sort of a thing, more telehealth.
That's lots of millions. Emily.
Everything Craig said, and I would want to see co-responder programs expanded to all corners of the state and better gap coverage between the crisis and outpatient services. I think there's a big gap there, and I would love to see more assertive community treatment and other really wraparound services to help the whole person and not just bits and parts of their recovery process.
Awesome. James, $1 million in 10 seconds.
Centralized collaborated teams, community-wide, where these teams work on individual problems as a group across the board. Take this panel and all the other panels today, put them together in a team and work collaboratively to solve the problem, one client at a time.
Matt.
I would say number one, identify and secure the right people, treatment providers, logistics, that kind of a thing, and get them on board. Two, secure high quality sober living and inpatient services or access to inpatient services. And three, collaborate with, in a very strong and direct way, co-responder programs so we can identify these folks on the front end before they hit this.
Thanks, Matt. Valerie, we'll end with you.
Definitely sober living and as well as affordable housing everywhere. Really good collaboration between law enforcement and other entities within the community. And I think the other piece is better education around, for everyone, around what addiction is and what it isn't, and how to, you know, how it literally changes the brain. And so it's going to be a process for folks to make changes. It's not a quick fix.
Thanks, Valerie. I want to take just a second to thank all our panelists. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me ahead of the panel and your time today. And with that, I will pass it back to Lindsay.